And Susan, do you want, I see Deb Bergner, I see. Do you want to bring her
You want me
in?
to grab her? I'll grab Deb
Please.
Bergner, bring her in.
Yep. And your live stream has started, so you're good to go.
Okay, thank you.
All right, very good. The time is 6:31 p.m., so I'm going to call this South Kingstown Town Council work session together. We are meeting tonight to discuss the ARP funds and how we might use them. We're joined by many of our department heads here tonight, so I'm looking forward to the conversation. Lots of opportunity. I will let Terry Murphy take it away.
Thank you, Council President.
Sorry, we need to do our first order of business, pledge to the flag. I missed that.
Certainly.
Susan.
No problem. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
with liberty
and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Susan. And now, Terry.
Thank you, Council President Collins. This evening, we will be presenting the council with recommendations for the expenditure of the American Rescue Plan Act funds that are coming to the town of South Kingstown. I'd like to run through a brief slide deck to just give a little bit of background before we jump into having our department heads present a little bit more detail on some of the funding recommendations. We'll run this similar to a budget hearing if that suits the council, and any way you'd like to handle it. If you'd like to ask questions as we go along or wait until the end of the full presentation, it's entirely up to you. We're flexible on that. So if I could ask Jamie to share his screen. He's got a PowerPoint. Okay, and everyone can see that?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so what I'd like to do is just provide some background. As I said, this is the first of two scheduled work sessions on the American Rescue Plan Act funds. The second one is scheduled for June 29th with outside agencies who will be presenting to the council requesting funding consideration as well. Next slide. Just as a reminder, the American Rescue Plan Act contains $350 billion for state and local recovery funds for eligible entities to respond to the detrimental impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. Slide. This is just, as you may recall, this was shown at one of the last council meetings. This is just a breakout of the entirety of the funding at the federal level, $1.7 trillion. And of that is the 350 billion is the green slice of pie there that is coming for state and local aid. So for allocations to municipalities, we have two different segments. We have non-entitlement aid to municipalities, and we'll be receiving $3 million from that category. And then we also have county-based aid, which the town will be receiving 5.95 million from that category. So just under $9 million is what South Kingstown will be receiving for responding to the pandemic. And again, the eligible uses, I know we've been over this, but just to give you a frame of reference for how this list of projects and initiatives was developed, the eligible uses really fall into four broad categories. We have response to the public health emergency or its negative impacts, which includes assistance to households, small businesses, nonprofits, or impacted industries such as tourism, travel, hospitality. We certainly can relate to the need for that. The second one is response to workers performing essential duties during the public health emergency by providing premium pay. Third category is provision of government services to the extent of the reduction in revenue due to the pandemic. And finally, the fourth category is investments to water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. So that those are the broad categories as the eligible uses is spelled out in the details. To be a bit more specific in terms of what does it mean, eligible uses should really address recovery, resiliency, accessibility with a focus on specific areas such as economic development, travel and tourism, community-based organizations that assist vulnerable populations, utility infrastructure, water and sewer to improve reliability and resiliency, broadband infrastructure to improve accessibility and affordability of internet, and organizational needs to improve the capabilities of municipal departments and staff to respond to public needs. So that's generally speaking what eligible uses speaks to. And then ineligible uses is offsetting tax revenue is ineligible, as is any pension fund deposits. So those are the two definite no-nos in terms of use of these funds. How did we come up with the project development for the town and what we'll be presenting here this evening? The initiatives and the projects that were developed by the town municipal staff, and also with some recommendations through the Economic Development Committee. We looked at projects and initiatives that would have a long-term positive result for the residents and the businesses and community-based organizations of South Kingstown that will address the impacts of the pandemic, essentially. It's wide and varied, but the staff spent a lot of time looking at how best to utilize these funds across a broad range to touch a lot of different populations and needs within the town and still fall under the appropriate criteria for eligibility. So we have, in terms of how we evaluated projects, it was having to do with uses associated with COVID economic impacts. Were they exacerbated by COVID-19, by the pandemic? Was there negative economic and health conditions among low income and socially vulnerable communities? And for infrastructure projects, is it necessary and related to water or sewer or broadband? And is the project high quality and resilient? So those really were the basis for developing projects that would fall into this list that's proposed this evening. So as noted in the narrative and the associated spreadsheet that you received a week or two ago, the staff developed and ranked over 60 projects and initiatives to consider for funding. And it resulted in a list totaling just over $9 million. So there were prioritization in order of 1 through 4. It was whittled down to priority items 1 and 2, which still exceeded the 9 million cap. And again, the evaluation criteria was based on how best to address the economic impact by COVID, or did COVID exacerbate the negative economic and health impacts. So after the preliminary round, there was another examination of the priority projects. Projects that were ranked a number 2 were reevaluated and eventually slimmed down to a listing that just captured approximately $9 million in spending for this presentation tonight and for consideration by the council. So that's really how we've presented this team of department heads really spent a lot of time looking at what things under their realm and their responsibilities would have the best eligibility and impact for the town of South Kingstown if they were to receive funding for the various projects that are listed. So that's how we got here. And then we have a variety of categories, and as reflected on, we'll put up the spreadsheet of the list of projects in a moment, but there were essentially 3 or 4 categories. We've had village revitalization, which focused on the primary economic areas within town. That would have included downtown Wakefield and Kingston and Peacedale and Matunic and those areas, which we'll get into in detail later this evening as we go through the projects. Responding to the economic impacts associated with households and nonprofits, such as housing and housing for the elderly. Also responding to negative impacts associated with the delay of government services and nonprofits. And we're still feeling that impact now as we're still on Zoom having public meetings. And there's also noted here a Plan B, which refers to water and broadband infrastructure. Essentially, those 2 items could eat up the entire $9 million if the council chose to go down that path. Certainly eligible in every way, shape, or form, but there's certainly consideration to be given to a wide array of issues and impacts from COVID-19. And where do we go next? We have the meeting this evening, which is a work session. We have a work session on June 29th at 6:30. Again, that is for outside agencies to present for consideration any funding requests to the council. And then similar to our budgetary process, there would be a public hearing scheduled, and the council needs to determine when that would likely be. July 12th would be the next town council meeting where there could be a public hearing placed on the agenda for the American Rescue Plan Act. And if necessary, the public hearing could be continued to a second town council meeting, depending on the response from the community. That's entirely up to the council. And that following town council meeting could be potentially a continuation of the public hearing and also a adoption of whatever the council decides would be the appropriate items selected for use of these funds. So that's, before we get into the projects, that is an item that the council will need to discuss in terms of scheduling. I don't know if you want to wait to do that till the end, Council President? Or?
This is the last slide on the slideshow.
Well, we're going to get into the spreadsheet of the list of projects and run down the projects.
Okay. Yeah. So let's talk about the date of the adoption. Does July 12th work for everybody? Any opposition? I can't. My screen is different than the normal view. I'm not hearing anything. Is that my computer? Can anybody else hear?
Not hear me?
No.
Okay, sorry about that. So just by choosing the 12th, are we committing to that date? I mean, I'm just curious to see if the community had more input and then we're sort of boxed into the 12th. Is it something that we could decide on the 29th? Or do we have to decide it tonight?
Are you asking me that, Councilwoman?
I'm asking everybody.
You certainly don't have to decide that this evening. The 12th doesn't necessarily box you in the sense that you could either choose to do a second public hearing or continue the public hearing that would be scheduled on the 12th. If there's a community response that requires a continuation of the public hearing, that's certainly an option.
I only raise that because it's a it's probably the busiest vacation weeks for people, and we're basically rebounding from shutdown of COVID, and people might have plan. I don't know. I'm just sort of trying to keep it more open to not be committed to the 12th. I don't know.
Susan?
Abel, we have to advertise a public hearing twice prior to, so we would have to advertise on July 12th and July 9th for a public hearing on July 12th. So I would have to know by the meeting on June 28th whether or not we were going to schedule the public hearing for July 12th. Keep in mind that once a public hearing is open, it can be continued to the following meeting. It can also be closed that evening and the decision continued to the following meeting. So you do have options, but I do need to know in advance so that we can properly advertise the public hearing.
Councilman Kelson?
July 12th is fine with me to open the public hearing, and then we'll continue it if need be.
Any other thoughts? All right, I think let's go on the presumption that we'll have it on July 12th, and if need be, we can continue it later. All right, sorry for the interruption. Let's go to that spreadsheet.
Okay, Jamie, if you,
Just give me a moment.
okay, thank you.
Pull that up. Okay, Councilman Collins, as Terry Murphy mentioned, we have project categories. And the first one in the slide that was presented was the village revitalization. And there are two aspects of that. There is a municipal investment program as well as a private sector investment program. I'll just run through the categories associated with that. And the intent of, I'm going to slide this, is to develop a municipal investment in your primary commercial areas in your village locations, as well as develop public and private partnerships designed to grow the economy and promote economic growth through its relationships with households, the businesses, tourism, and hospitality that have been greatly impacted by COVID-19. In doing this, we looked at focusing on Kingston's villages, primarily Wakefield, Peacedale, West Kingston, Lower Tower Hill, and Matunic Beach commercial areas. And then slides, area definitions were sent to council a few weeks ago. And they also mentioned that a primary geographic location within a half mile of those center areas. With regards to the public investment, there's close to $5 million associated with that. Associated with street lighting, landscaping, streetscape improvements, hard goods, sidewalks, fencing, historic plaque, creation of pocket parks. An example of that would be the Union Fire District property on High Street and Schaefer Street. Trail improvements, traffic calming, wayfinding, new bus shelters, the creation of design standards associated with the commercial areas. In that category also is Old Mountain Field rehabilitation, enhance and discovery summer camps, after school mental health programs, and paramedical. And those would be, again, municipal investments within the core areas of the town. And as I mentioned, that is about a $5 million investment. Associated or in concert with that municipal investment would be the development of a private sector investment program on a matching grant basis for facade improvements, streetscape improvements, general placemaking to improve the appearance and economic viability of the central commercial business districts, as well as improvements with business wayfinding, lighting, fencing, historic placards, landscaping. And along with that, also a recommendation to have architect or architectural firm on call to assist the private sector in their grant applications for facade improvements. That's at 62,500. What that would allow primarily is 50 businesses use architectural services of approximately 10 hours at $125 an hour to help them work through that grant program and articulate the facade improvements. Understanding that not every business person in the community has access or the resources for an architect or understands how potential improvements could be made to their building or buildings. Again, that program would be $5 million on the public sector and $2 million on the private public sector for a total of $7.45 million.
And if I can jump in here for one moment, Jamie, one of the things about these expenditures and what you should remember is that the impact of COVID-19 on the local economy and our businesses is such that they're trying to rebound. What the town can do and what this is really presenting is the opportunity to revive their main streets, the main street in Wakefield, in West Kingston, in Matunic, so that they can see the tourism, the visitors come back to the area and revive their business climate. So I think it's important to note that right now COVID-19 and everyone, it's obvious, but these businesses need as much help as they can get, and investing in Main Street by improving the overall look and feel of the environment will attract visitors and tourists to town to support these businesses. I'm sorry, Jamie, go ahead.
No, thank you, Terry. Okay, the next category that we have is in essence response to the negative economic impacts associated with households and nonprofits impacted by COVID. The overall investment here would be $400,000. There are two categories. The categories are focused on affordability as a result of COVID-19 and the market loss and economic stability within the community. There's a proposal to put $300,000 in a housing fund that would be available on a 50-50 match in an effort to create 15 new affordable units within the community in a walkable setting. So, the goal would be in close to your central village districts. In addition, $100,000 to assist the elderly community with regards to home repairs that may have been deferred based on COVID-19, and again, help to jumpstart that and reinvigorate that aspect of the community. Again, looking at that $20,000 in 15 units. So a lot of the lumber costs in the last 18 months have doubled in some aspects. So that would allow some opportunity for the creation of those units, either on an individual standpoint or from the development side, being a builder or developer. The third category is looking at the delivery of government services and nonprofits impacted by COVID-19. These are an attempt to affect those businesses and communities that provide, and the community that provides services to the residents of South Kingstown. Total investment here is just under $1 million. Again, I'll go through them quickly. Natural resource officer, bookmobile, grant and contract manager, upgrades to software, audiovisual meeting within town council chambers. That was brought up at town council meeting last night. Drone for public safety, youth employment program, and public safety, health staffing, EMA, and police. To the town manager's point she made earlier, we do have members, department heads in the audience tonight who may be able to speak much more eloquently with regards to natural resource officer, bookmobile, software upgrades, audiovisual within council chambers, drone, and public safety, mental health. Also paired with that $955,000 would be the municipal investment to nonprofits. $100,000 for nonprofit childcare targeted for low and moderate income households, and $200,000 for nonprofit social service type grants, competitive process, again, serving low and moderate income households. The total of that category is 1.255 million. And again, those three categories total $9.1 million. Terry mentioned Plan B. Plan B is the infrastructure aspect, and the legislation is fairly clear. Water treatment, sewer treatment, and broadband. So again, John Shaw can speak clearly to these subject matters. There was $500,000 for improvements, new facility for water treatment, and $250,000 for broadband and downtown Main Street being Wakefield, and then $650,000 for broadband radio project. And again, those funds equate to looking at the replacement of the downtown revitalization funds. So it's a 7 million swap for a 7 million infrastructure program. So I believe we are available if there are any questions. I know I ran through things rather quickly, but we do have some slides to expand upon some of the subject matters and can talk more about the dollar amounts and the meaning behind each line item.
Thank you, Jamie. Councilwoman Bergner, your hand is up. Is that from before? Questions on this list of priorities? That let me see. I guess one big question, of course, is there's basically two options here on the table, sort of a big smorgasbord of projects, maybe more tailored towards traditional economic development, and then the other, big massive infrastructure investments that will really, of course, help set tables for economic development, for decades in some ways, but less of the traditional idea of economic development. Any sort of preference by folks? Councilman Kelso?
Will we hear from each department head on each individual project tonight? Okay.
Yes, so we can certainly go through each project and get detail on the the background and the need and why it is on this list in terms of how it will address COVID impacts on the town. The placemaking and village revitalization project, again, that speaks to primarily planning, and it really is going to address tourism and the village revitalization and help businesses to rebound. Some of the items in here, and Jamie, I think you can speak to the broader planning and design of some of these items. There are a few specific ones that can be called out and explained in some detail. One is, or two are the Discovery Camp, summer camp program for mental health, and I can certainly speak to that, and also the Old Mountain Field rehab project, and I can speak to that. Jamie, if you want to just give a general or give an explanation as to the funding that's spelled out here, and particularly I would suggest looking at the larger amounts and what they mean in terms of revitalizing the village areas.
Again, looking at a revitalization program within the villages, and we'll talk in broad tent since there were 5 areas identified, but if we look specifically as an example of looking at Main Street in Wakefield, that you would look at making an investment in that community, both on the municipal side, in that area, both on the municipal side and the public-private partnership. So there's buy-in from the businesses within that area who suffered greatly during COVID-19. Revenues were down. Your restaurants lost a great deal of revenue throughout that, as well as the retail aspect. People didn't go to stores because of COVID protocols. A lot of people relied on internet purchases and the ability to revitalize the area, welcome people back in, jumpstart a program that some of the business owners may have deferred maintenance, as well as the town deferring maintenance. And if you can have a vibrant downtown, that will spark investment long-term as well and give you a return on your investment. President Collins mentioned that with regards to water treatment, but in some aspects, if you make a facade improvement, businesses in some aspects see a 30% return on that investment or 30% return on the increase in business due to the facade improvements within a community. Making the community more inviting with regards to streetscape lighting, wayfinding, pedestrian movements, fence aspects, historic placards, wayfinding, traffic calming, all the things the council has talked about in a number of meetings and are listed in some of your priorities and goals and objectives. This gives you an opportunity to undertake them under COVID recovery versus a long-term capital program that you would fund a water treatment or a sewer treatment facility in a long-term capital plan. Being able to jumpstart some of the areas with regards to the creation of pocket parks and again, helping the business community, being able to potentially have an 80-20 match where you can offer a business owner $80,000 of facade improvements or building improvements, signage improvements for a $20,000 buy-in could be substantial for that business as well as return into the community as far as making the long-lasting investment in the downtown. In a lot of it, and I do have some slides if I don't want to jump back and forth between the spreadsheet and our PowerPoint presentation, but I do have some examples of facade improvements and wayfinding and placemaking and to be able to articulate some of those aspects. With regards to the private-public partnership, you have some businesses in the downtown who are anchors within the community that have chain link fences that abut Main Street, who may not be able to make the investment in a COVID scenario due to lost revenue to upgrade that chain link fence where you have, concrete to brick to asphalt. Maybe the last thing they're going to do in a downturn of the economy as a relationship to COVID is make an investment of $20,000 or $30,000 to improve their facade or improve a portion of their property. But if they could do that in a matching grant program, there are opportunities to stretch that dollar substantially within the downtown. You have a street tree program that was initiated a number of years ago. Some of those trees no longer exist on Main Street. Some of the tree grates are broken. You have a mix of sidewalk treatments within the downtown from brick to bluestone to concrete. Some of the bluestone's failing, some of the brick needs to be reset. They're exacerbated by COVID because the investment can't be made by the private sector due to the downfall in economies or slippage in economy and revenue. This gives you the ability as a community to jumpstart and reinvigorate that program and make the downtown stronger than it perhaps was and can carry that into the future. Again, matching grants on the facade improvements, including lighting improvements, matching grants on fencing, the ability to celebrate some of the historic aspects. The background slides that you saw tonight are actually a picture of Main Street, pre-car, gravel treated way with horse and buggy and wagon and mule team. And if we go back to those slides, I'll show you that historic car. It's not bringing that back, but it's honoring that and reinvigorating the investment in the downtown, but also making sure that you give the resources to the community with regards to creating the design palette that you would be looking for, and then giving them the ability to work with an architect or architectural firm to bring that to fruition. That's a little bit, including in that is, traffic calming. Traffic calming could be the advent of landscaping or hardscape associated with intersections. The intersection of Main Street and High Street, there's a building on the northwest side of the intersection as you enter High Street. That's asphalt with poles and little chain between the poles. There are opportunities to set a placemaking opportunity there, and working with that landowner who may not have the resource to invest in the business with the downfall of COVID, who may be able to, on a matching grant, do more for the community and make that business stronger and make it more attractive so people spend more time. And the result of more time in your village course means an economic uptick. And hopefully that puts things a little more in perspective of what you would try to accomplish with those funds. And again, I have some graphic representations of that.
Yeah, and perhaps we can get to those in a bit. One thing that sticks out to me in discussing sort of this tranche of funding is, the EDC has spent a lot of time focusing on the Saugatucket River, the watershed and economic development opportunities around there. Talked about revitalizing the park there, the Olmsted Park. And I wonder if we should carve out a specific line item for that, or whether you just feel like that sort of fits into this funding, or if we already have plans to find funding for that type of stuff somewhere else. And then one thing I would also say is maybe a specific carve out for tricentennial celebrations, improvements. It'd be great to do something really like, a big art installation be here for 3 centuries that people can look back on and say, wow, that was, the last time we've done something like that. Anyway, or at least another century, something big that can be, another placemaking opportunity, something that will draw tourists and talk about the history. Anyway.
President Collins, in response to that, I think, great ideas with regard, Saugatucket, we were tasked with coming up with some figures associated with the revitalization program. There's $200,000 in a line item for fencing, Main Street and Riverwalk. Some of those funds could potentially be earmarked for Saugatucket as part of the program. Historic placards of $5,000. Some of those resources could be used there. Creation of the park at Pox, there's $150,000 in those. So some, although specific projects aren't called out, that money could be, moved around and shuffled with a program associated with the complete revitalization of a specific area. The key thing that I think the town manager and I at least will remind you of is that all of the items that need to be prioritized by council need to fall back on the impact was caused or exacerbated by COVID. So the tricentennial celebration, you have to be able to answer the question, was it caused or exacerbated by COVID? Well, that's something in the future. Now you can revitalize your downtown, which will have an effect on that celebration that will occur in the future. But I'm not sure you'd be able to direct funds directly to that cause. And then the second aspect, there's a strong presumption that COVID exacerbated the negative economic and health conditions among low income and social vulnerable communities. So we need to answer, in essence, kind of yes to both of those questions in order for it to make a list, or there has to be a rational nexus between what's on the list and those criteria as it relates to economic impacts.
Yeah, understood. I think that the improvements that I'm, sort of mentioning there, improvements that we've been talking about as part of increasing potential tourism, foot traffic in downtown Wakefield. And that is the way that, we would apply these funds to it. The fact that I think downtown is really the center of the, economic part of town. Makes sense to sort of focus some resources there. Terry?
Thank you. I just want to follow up on that. I will say that Saugatucket Park is essentially an extension of the downtown area by virtue of it being connected with a pedestrian bridge, and activity that happens downtown generally or many times overflows into Saugatucket Park. There was significant impact during COVID in terms of the public utilizing all of our public parks and facilities outside, because you couldn't be inside. The only way you were going to recreate and be safe was to be outside. Our parks were highly utilized. There were additional picnic tables added outside so that people could order out from businesses and eat out. So I think there is a connection to be made with regard to improving Saugatucket Park, in that it assisted the community with coping with COVID. And it is an extension of the Main Street area. And I think that we do have some grant funding for improvements in that area, but we can certainly look at it could be, there are other improvements that could be made that could really connect it to the Main Street area and the business district, and allow for activities like concerts and events that could easily lead the public straight to Main Street over the pedestrian bridge or around the corner on High Street to avail themselves of economic activity and contribute to it. So in addition to that, there were a couple of other items within that first category that I would like to speak to. If that's okay, I'll give a description of the Old Mountain Field improvements, and also the youth mental health program. So with regard to Old Mountain Field and the request for funding, or the recommendation for funding to contribute to the improvements of Old Mountain Field. As you know, this has been a park that's been in the capital plan for some time now. There's a significant need for new restrooms, new concession building, redesign of the parking lot and the traffic flow in and out of that park. It's one of the busiest, if not the busiest parks in town, with a multitude of amenities. We also saw that it was heavily used by the public throughout COVID. That being said, there were also cancellations of all kinds of organized sports and activities that could not happen in the park. That contributed to not being able to have the Ocean State Waves in the park to generate tourism and folks coming into town for baseball games and then going out to dinner afterwards. The concession building, the business that ran the concession building could not operate because there were no activities going on in the park, with the exception of individual families socially distancing and utilizing that park. So there's a number of reasons that COVID impacted that particular park. It also should be noted that Old Mountain Field is the oldest park in town. It also is a gateway feature of Wakefield. It certainly is situated in an area where the visitors are drawn into town for retail, for restaurants, for theater. And I think that this particular area would only contribute, the betterment of the park would revive the activity in the park. It would attract more people to the park. It would become more event friendly to help revive the overall activity in Wakefield. So that's really the description that I would give you for the rationale of funding for improving Old Mountain Field. There is capital funding available. It is limited to the replacement of the restroom and concession building with a pretty standard design that would not necessarily be an attraction for a place that we would want to be event friendly and friendly to the public for all of the reasons, all of the amenities that are at that park: tennis, skate park, baseball, softball, basketball, the hiking trails. It's connected to Broad Rock. There's any number of reasons. So I think that really, and it's also located in an area that is partially low mod income. And so there's a lot of folks who can walk to Old Mountain Field. They don't need to get a ride to use the skate park or use the baseball field. And so it makes it very accessible for a lot of folks who live in a densely populated area. So that's what I would say about the Old Mountain Field project. Certainly we're looking at, if that funding were to be available, an upgraded concession building and restroom facility, and also a redesign of the parking area for safety purposes, and also to increase the capacity. And there's other conceptual ideas. I just don't know that even with another $300,000, we would be able to make it all happen, but it would be a long-term master plan to aspire to in the future. And the other item is mental health supports for young people. We know that isolation for a year and some for young people in our community has had a detrimental impact and will likely continue to have an impact. And for that reason, the Recreation Department has proposed funding in the amount of $40,000 to bring on a mental health and behavioral health specialist for camp programming, and to be able to have that position as a resource, particularly within the next year or two, to address what we believe is going to be a spike in mental health needs for students, actually for all ages, but particularly we're looking at the youth programs for kids in our community. And our either through a position or through additional training for staff, so that they're equipped to deal with what we're anticipating to be some issues with students who just, let's face it, I think we will all have some long-term impact from being isolated from each other for over a year. So that's what I would describe in terms of the mental health, addressing mental health within the Recreation Department and the youth camp programs. And then I think there's one other, if Chief Stanley would describe the paramedicine program, I'll hand it off to Craig.
Thank you, Terry, and good evening. Yeah, one of the, as in our past objectives or planning in the department, was to move in the direction of paramedicine and really capturing, being able to provide healthcare, or bridging the gap of healthcare between those in the community that aren't always able to receive healthcare, and have, the ripple effect of that, and also mental health. And as the theme here, and Terry really discussed it, is we're seeing where pretty much impact on mental health of people that we think the normal well are not being seen within emergency settings, or their lack of constant treatment that they need causes them to not take their medicine, get off kilter. And we see a response from our perspective, from EMS, and then also from PD, and it kind of runs together. One of the things mentioned here, and we are seeing it now, is especially with the youth, our call volume for mental health crisis with patients under 18 has substantially increased, where we would not typically see that type of call. We're seeing that pretty much daily, dealing with mental health issues with the pediatric population. So the funding here, through the budget, the town council was very supportive in the department moving in this direction. Of course, the question always goes of funding. And then the American Rescue Act came, and we found that this would be a great opportunity for us to initially fund this to get it up off the ground. And really for us, it bridges, the divide between, mental health needs, the community, improves patient outcomes, reduce healthcare costs, reducing non-emergency calls, tying up the system and then within the emergency room. I have pretty good support from the local hospitals for this program to get going, and also with Washington County Behavioral Health. This is a big initiative with them of bridging the gap of mental health, and really this gives us the jump start to move in that direction. So I'm very excited and hoping that we can fund this to get the program up and running.
Thank you, Chief. All right, any further discussion, sir, on this portion, or do we want to hear about sort of the plan B with water treatment? Councilwoman Kelso?
So I have some questions about the spreadsheet and the numbers. So each item has a dedicated amount. Is there documentation to support that dedicated amount, or have we taken the pool of money and divided it by priority, right? And what we think we'll need? That's my first question. And is the money that we're seeing and the line items to be distributed across all villages? So say LED lighting, right? We've got some street lighting there, and we're looking at $650,000. Does that address all the villages in that line item? Or are some of these items just specific to certain villages?
So I can address your first question, Councilwoman Kelso, and that is with regard to the actual proposed figures for each of these initiatives or projects. Some are numbers that are hard numbers that are coming from quotes for various activities. For instance, the Discovery Camp Mental Health Program, $40,000. That's calculated by a certain number of hours, a rate of pay that could support a part-time mental health specialist. Others are estimates based on what department heads know or anticipate would be the general cost of the items that are listed here. So it's a bit of a combination. And what I will do is pass on to Jamie the second question on the villages.
Okay, if I can just ask you though on that again.
Mm-hmm.
So, I understand somebody there knows what an LED streetlight costs. Like, I understand that. What I am not understanding is $650,000 for street lighting, right? Where?
Mm-hmm.
Where? From Robinson Street to High Street? From Old Tower Hill Road up to the Wakefield Mall? What are we, you know what I mean? I don't understand enough to know where those numbers came from.
Right.
So I'll try and shed a little bit of light on street lighting, with no pun intended. We looked at kind of a corridor setting. It's not intended to go from High Street all the way through Lower Tower Hill Road, Shaw's and the car dealer. It'd be targeted. In some of the discussions with John Schock, they have some funds available to do LED switch outs on the heads of some of the lighting. So some of this would complement that. And some of it would be the creation of new poles and the expansion of existing lighting within Main Street. There's a significant amount of historic replica period lighting within the Main Street corridor. So it would be potentially expanding that to the northeast and south also. But a lot of it was trying to estimate where you could kind of focus on one area, not knowing where the business community would land, Councilman Kelso, that, if all of a sudden everyone in West Kingston wanted to participate in facade improvements, and you were looking at that as becomes the more strategic targeted area, you may look at a complete redo there. It's not an attempt to reinvigorate every single downtown area or village area from A to Z. It's targeted money within certain areas based on the investment made by the private sector. So again, it's a roundabout answer, but the 650 would not accomplish street lighting in all targeted 5 villages.
So
And
is,
they do
is what I'm looking
1.5.
for, the 5 million, excluding, Old Mountain Field and the mental health portion of this, primarily targeted for downtown Wakefield?
That's for the council to decide. It depends do you want to redo one complete area or partially redo 5 areas? That's a discussion that we didn't make the call on the department side. It's a great question. But to me, that's for the policymakers to decide. If you spent all of that in Wakefield, you could make a substantial impact in Wakefield. But there are also some properties on 108 that could use some attention. There are some properties in Peacedale that perhaps could use some attention. And there may be some businesses willing to be involved there. Again, to me, that's a policy decision. But again, that $5 million does not make substantial changes to all 5 villages if it was spread in essence at 1.25 between or $1 million per village.
All right. So the staff has not made any determination what sidewalks and crosswalks will be improved.
We did look at some of the sidewalk needs within the community. Again, it's targeted. There are no sidewalks or there are limited sidewalks in West Kingston. If you were to build a sidewalk program in West Kingston, that $350,000 may not make it. Sorry, the $1 million may not do that entire area. But if you were to expand some of the sidewalk program within Wakefield or Peacedale, or fix some of the things that are broken in those areas, again, you can affect change in those areas.
Right. I don't disagree with anything you're saying. I guess I'm looking for more clarity in the plan as presented.
We haven't drilled down to the level I think you're asking us for at this point in time.
Great, then that answers my question that you have not drilled down. So thank you.
Councilwoman Berg.
Thanks, Abel. I really liked Deb Kelso's questions, and they were really helpful to hear. What I'm curious to sort of think about is there are probably some areas of South Kingstown that were hurt harder and will take a little bit longer to bounce back, and I don't know if we know what those areas are. I know that, the Kingston area, 108, where, when you don't have lots of students for 6 to 8 months, or a year, really, without the same number of URI students around, maybe those areas might be more impacted. Is there a way to sort of think about that? Because I think we're going to see downtown Wakefield spring back a lot more quickly, I would think, based on they were already much more established and vibrant 12 months out of the year. And so if we wanted to talk as a council about maybe there are things we could pick out in each area, each village that made sense, so that we were I guess, maybe efficiently using the resources in a way that would help them the most. I think, obviously, doesn't make sense really to put sidewalks in West Kingston where there are none, because it's not gonna have an impact. So I do like thinking about targeting resources in each area. And also, I believe that certain areas will take a little bit longer to bounce back. So I didn't know if my other question to go to the Discovery Camp, I think the mental health is clearly an issue that we need to address, but I didn't know. We had heard from the school department that they were doing some extended school year things and some bridge programs. Would that be something that the schools would be doing with their COVID relief funds and not using municipal funds? Does anyone know the answer to that?
So I can speak to, we've actually had a recent conversation with the representatives from the school departments, from the school psychologists, and there was discussion specific to camp programming, and knowing there was a summer learning academy this year, which extends the school year for, I believe it's any student, through the first week of August, and collaborating so that there was an offering for after school, which I believe it's only a morning session, to be able to provide camp opportunities to students after school. So that there's coordination on that level, in terms of the school department also knows that there's scholarship funds available. So there is assistance with regards to being able to just assimilate kids over from school in July and early August into a camp program. I don't know the degree to which the school department is looking at funding that they may be receiving to establish additional resources within the school parameters. I don't think necessarily that will carry over into the recreation arena, unless it's a position that doesn't have a summer assignment, and potentially it complements the school year in shifting someone over to the summertime program. That's what I know right now. We've not had a conversation about resources being made available on the school department side for other programming.
Thanks.
Councilwoman Rose?
I think that was a great question. And if I can offer some input from, an early childhood educator standpoint, I think that this is, a really important piece of funding to have, regardless of what the schools have to offer. I think, we already have kids who, they know their ABCs and 1, 2, 3s, but when the kid in the sandbox takes their shovel, they don't know how to get it back. They're, coming into a pandemic lacking those social skills. And that lack of social skills is what leads to behavior problems that might not be picked up in schools. So what I would envision or imagine for this position would be like a support person or training that would, help children and camp counselors navigate the lack of social skills that it's been exacerbated by COVID-19 and isolation. I've seen it, with students before, like, when they come back in the summer, just from summer vacation, there's already a deficiency from where they were when they leave us at the end of the school year. So now, having been isolated for over a year, right, the social skills are going to be seriously lacking. So I think that camp counselors are going to need that backing, that support to deal with a child who might not have been a behavior problem or exhibited any behaviors a year ago, now might be, and the school will not pick up on that. So I think that's a really important piece to to have.
Thank you, Jess. Councilman McEntee?
Terry, I like the list you've come up with here. I think a lot of great items. I know that the first tranche is going to be 4.5 million of the 9. So I'm just curious, is there a sort of a priority as to which fund should be expended first? To me, it seems like the way we've been talking about this is the private public partnership monies to sort of allow, great return on a business activity to what it was pre-pandemic. Is that sort of what the recommendation will be?
I would say that's entirely up to the council. Once the council decides whether or not these initiatives and programs are the direction you want to go in. I think there's probably more to consider since you will be hearing from outside agencies. So at this point, I can't say. I will say that the town has applied for the first $1.5 million of the municipal funding as of today. That's been submitted to the state, and within a year we'll get the second half of that $3 million allotment of money. So we can certainly put together a prioritization. I do think the economic recovery, where we can partner with the businesses, with community members, with organizations, by providing matching funds, would certainly probably be a good start. But it's, again, I'll defer to the council once you have the full picture of what programs that we're recommending, and then also what you're considering for nonprofit organizations that will be presenting at the next work session. I think that's certainly a piece of this puzzle as well. And maybe it's a split, maybe it's a, parsing out in a certain percentage to various projects. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Tara, can you just briefly walk us through the application process as to receive the monies? You sort of got into it a little bit. Can you just sort of clarify that further?
Sure, I can walk you through just the, it's a very simple process, and Zach can probably jump in here too. It's an application to the state, the Office of Pandemic Recovery, and it does not ask for detail in terms of what the projects are going to be. It's just simply the money is now available, put in your request, and it gets forwarded to the municipalities. And then when it is spent, the towns are responsible, obviously, for reporting based on the requirements of the Rescue Plan Act that substantiate what the expenditures are on, that they do relate to the impact of COVID-19. And that's what I know as of this point. Zach, I don't know if you want to jump in, if there's any other detail you'd like to provide.
Sure. Right now it's a very straightforward process. We've sent in all the necessary paperwork it's under review. Once the state reviews that and confirms it, they will release the first tranche of funds for the non-entitlement community money, which is the little over 1.5 million. After that, it's basically our responsibility to account for those funds and then how they're spent. So simply, we will set up a fund for this money. We will have, when you determine the project list, we will have those projects set up, and the appropriations will be assigned to them, and we'll track it down to the project level. So at some point, if we're ever audited or have to provide supporting documentation, we'll have all that available. And that's pretty much what we know right now. If we need guidance, it's available from the Office of Pandemic Recovery. We can ask questions on the guidance from the Treasury if there's anything that comes up. Right now, it's still, it's not exactly black and white, but we're trying to work through the gray.
Got it. Thank you. A few more questions for you, Zach. Now, a lot of these items seem like accelerated capital expenditures, improvements, things like that. I just want to ask you if any of these items will have an effect on future operating budgets, whether an increase in budget expenses or actually efficiencies there and savings, or budget neutral.
So the short answer is it depends. If you want to use, if it's a project that we can accelerate and ties back to the capital improvement plan. We can remove that from the capital improvement plan, assuming you don't want to backfill any funds there with another project. Then you would see a potential savings. If it can accelerate the project through the capital improvement timeline, it gets it online faster, it provides, whatever the project is or service to the community sooner. Again, we can take all this into account as we go through, next year's budgeting process, and it would kind of act in tandem with it. If there's, as the department heads find out what projects are finalized and what's going to be accepted, we would then work with them and compare it back to their capital improvement plans. And if there's anything that's redundant, we'd remove if it was fully funded through these federal funds. And then we would come back to the council, depending on what your direction would be for the budget process. If there's an appetite to increase the capital improvement plan, keep it status quo, similar to what we've done through previous work sessions with you.
Got it. Thank you.
All right. One question that occurs to me as sort of projects were prioritized, was consideration given to the ability to sort of leverage these funds with potential, federal grant programs or any type of other monies out there that might serve as matching dollars to really even increase the impact of these dollars even more?
I will say that there are some of the projects that are on this list already have some grant funding associated with them. For instance, Saugatucket Park, which isn't listed specifically, but there's grant funding associated with that project already. There's also other stormwater management funds that's out there. So there could be complementary funding that could support some of these items. Council President Collins, I can't speak specifically to any particular one. Perhaps some of the department heads may know better specific to their items, but that's certainly a consideration to be taken under advisement to look for complementary grant funds.
And just sort of in line with that thought, a lot of these are sort of streetscape improvements that we're considering. So I wonder if sort of this discussion should impact the way we're, approaching the state transportation improvement program. We're going to be submitting our list of projects to them soon, I imagine. So how can we, use some of these funds to improve what might be, just traditional resurfacing program from DOT or something like that. And so many of our most important roads here are state roads, and there's some of those projects upcoming through the TIP. Maybe we can sort of leverage these funds to make street improvements that make it something really special.
Sure. John, I don't know if you want to speak to that at all. I don't know if John's on or.
Yep. So I think the project that comes to mind with state roads is Route 138 reconstruction. And we've recently had some meetings with RIDOT about funding that project, at least contract one, which runs from Route 108 to the Amtrak bridge. RIDOT, the late Senator Chafee was able to get us an earmark. That earmark money is still available, but it will not at least fund what RIDOT believes are the current 90% design plans for contract one. I think, in all honesty, contract two from the Amtrak bridge to Route 2, but I don't know if that will ever happen. I think we'd be lucky right now to get contract one done, which includes a roundabout at Keeney, a roundabout at Ministerial Road, and traffic calming improvements in the village of Kingston. So, we kind of kicked around the idea of trying to help supplement RIDOT, even though it is a state road and it is their project, to try to see if, perhaps we could assist with some type of funding level to at least get contract one going. So we're still awaiting at this point some feedback from RIDOT. They're still, digging deep to try to find any additional funding to try to get at least contract one done.
And if you
It's
just
been in the planning stages for 25 years. I mean, that's how long the project area committee's been around. So I'll probably be retired before they put a shovel in the ground the way it's going, but I think that's a priority right now. We got High Street done, which was a heavy lift for us. I think everybody realizes High Street was way overdue. So I think 138 reconstruction is the next important project for RIDOT at this point. That's again, it's 90% design has been completed for contract one.
And then the other project that sort of jumps out to me is, sort of connecting that last, mile of sidewalks along Route 108 from, Peacedale up to where the sidewalk is on Curtis Corner. And then, as it gets up closer to Kingston. I know that's been on our list of priorities for a while, but obviously expensive. But something to see if we can move along.
And the other RIDOT project that's really important is the intersection of Broad Rock, Stony Fort, and 138. The alignment of Stony Fort and Broad Rock is not across from each other. It's a very dangerous intersection. And I think that's ranked as one of the higher intersections as far as accidents in RIDOT in the state. So that's on their radar screen too for safety improvements.
President Collins, some of the difficulties, and John Chalk mentioned them, as the Route 138 project's been kicking around for 25 years. These funds, based on some of the information contained in the legislation, need to be spent in a 2 to 3 year time frame. At least, within that second to third year, be allocated to a project with a PO. So we have the opportunity to move much quicker at the municipal side than perhaps at the state side. But I absolutely agree with you about some of the priorities that the council has mentioned and really honing in on some of those.
Councilwoman Rose?
Thanks, Abel. So this is a great presentation. I really like how everything is broken down. I'm noticing that right now there are only 5 people watching. But so I guess that leads me to think, how can we encourage more community members to take part in this? I've been reading a lot about participatory budgeting. When people have ownership over it, it goes a long way. So I'm trying to think outside the box to see how we can get more than 5 people to come and take part. This is such a great opportunity, and there are so many people hard at work to make sure that these funds are spent appropriately. And I think that to have input from the community, as much as we can, would be great. So I'm just sort of brainstorming different ways to engage people. And I don't know if anybody else had come up with something exciting and out of the box to encourage people to take part in this process.
Councilwoman.
Yeah. So I think we will talk about other projects. I know that the water ban is making people very anxious, and they want more information about improving water so that we don't have an odd even water ban for the summer. But I had also a question about the bus shelters. I don't know I can't recall if we talked about them, but like, where would those be, and why would we be building them and not RIPTA? Are they like more attractive bus shelters, more placemaking bus shelters? You're nodding. Okay. So, and they would replace the plexiglass type of things, or they would, go ahead, Jamie.
Yeah. Good observation. And again, I do have a slide. Rich Bourbonnais, the town engineer, has spent some time looking at bus shelters and something that may be more appropriate for the community with regards to the aesthetics than the standard RIDOT bus shelter, which, they spread across the entire state, no different than any other state in New England. Again, it goes with the placemaking, Councilman Bergner, that, trying to create an identity that relates to South Kingstown within the specific area, whether, and again, you may have 3 slightly similar but different versions from whether you're in Peacedale, Kingstown, Matunic. But again, really going into that wayfinding, placemaking setting and using it as an identifier to that community. To a point, you used a quick analogy to both Councilman Kelsa and Rose, and as well as yourself, Ms. Bergner. Spending money in one place is like giving that place the largest chocolate chip cookie, and everybody will be pretty amazed and happy and tell you how wonderful that chocolate chip cookie is. The option is you take that one large chocolate chip cookie and you break it into 4 small chocolate chip cookies. It'll be just as tasteful and wonderful, but it won't be as charismatic as doing one large cookie. Everybody, may appreciate, but again, that's a policy decision. The component we had initially when we discussed it is taking away ingredients from the chocolate chip cookie. Expectations of having a chocolate chip cookie, but not funding for the chocolate chips. Or whittling down so you remove the flour or the eggs, but the expectations are still to serve a chocolate chip cookie. So kind of an odd analogy, but I think something that people can understand.
Right. In terms of just getting back to Councilman Rose's point about trying to solicit community input into this process, maybe, we could put up a page on the website, ARP page. I mean, I think eventually we'd want to do that just to highlight what some of these funds are going to be doing. But before we get to that point, just have something where people can drop suggestions, like suggestion bot. We could advertise that.
President Collins, another community within the country has exactly that. They actually have a form on their webpage, exactly as a suggestion box, where someone can fill out that form and in essence electronically drop it. So I think someone has already created that we could replicate.
Great. Terry?
Am I unmuted? Sorry. One of the other items that came up is, actually Lori Fox had mentioned, we do have capabilities to do online polling and surveying where we could create a poll or survey that has some parameters set within what's been presented already, options for the public to respond to. It gives people the opportunity to weigh in on what their their preferences would be within kind of a set parameters. So, and then could also have a separate "what are your suggestions" type of comment section. But there's ways to solicit that type of input in the short term.
Thank you. Councilwoman Rose, is your hand up again, or is that from? Okay, Councilwoman.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think that's a great idea because especially when we're looking at this question of, do we want the whole cookie or do we want 5 pieces of the cookie, right? It's a great analogy. I think that's important to get community input on, before we finalize things. That's something that we want to know from a lot of people. What do you want? Do you want to see something more condensed, more eye-catching in the center of town, or do you want to see it spread out. I think that's something that is for the community to decide more so than just the people sitting here. So I think I like that idea. I think it's great. And that was a great analogy. Thank you.
Oh, and one thing I would just say is, there's enough money here where we can probably do one really impressive thing, and then also a whole bunch of other small improvements as well. So it doesn't have to be an either or situation like that. Councilwoman Kelso.
So just to reiterate, we do have some public hearings scheduled, a public hearing to begin with, and we'll continue that if needed. So, the word to the community is July 12th, or send us an email prior to, if you can't be there July 12th, and let us know what you're thinking. But I think, we get elected to represent people, right? So the decision is ours. And I'm always skeptical of surveys that are not scientific based, because, one overzealous participant can skew a survey very easily. So I like the idea of soliciting comments from residents very much, so we can hear the ideas from them. One question for Terry: once the money is deposited in the account, what is the time frame to spend it all, and what happens if we do not get there? Say the supply side, can't come through in the 2 years, or, everybody in the world every town in America is trying, vying for concrete, right? So tell me the parameters of the program.
So as I understand it, the timeline goes through 2026 to wrap up the entire, from soup to nuts, so that your final reporting is in 2026. Again, Zach, correct me if I'm wrong on the timeline. But in terms of extensions, again, a typical grant program, at least in my experience, has had a mechanism for requesting an extension, whether or not, and to be honest, Councilwoman Kelso, I don't know if there's anything in the American Rescue Plan Act that speaks to extensions at this point, or if that will be something that, based on what occurs, as you said, with supply and demand, and every community in the country looking to construct new roads and sidewalks, that could be implemented. But I don't have that answer for you right now. I can certainly look into that and get back to you.
But it's a distinct 5-year period as it stands now.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes. And so the money will be deposited without questions, right? And then the town will have to prove the expenditures. And do we have to give the money back if they don't like a project? Like, what's the,
so the town,
tell me the parameters again.
The town has to report on the project with, and that's why the criteria, eligibility criteria, is so critical for all of these items, is because you have to make the case that these projects are being put in place as a result of the impact of COVID-19. So yes, the town has to report on each project or initiative, and how it's meeting or solving a problem that was either caused by COVID-19 or exacerbated by the pandemic. So there is, that is something that, we have to be very careful about when we are presenting these recommendations, because we need to substantiate that everything that we're recommending is something that's going to help improve the community and make something better that was made worse by COVID-19.
Okay, so the finance director said we'll have that $1.5 million shortly, a couple of weeks maybe, right? So when we get that 1.5 million and we decide we want to start with sidewalks, do we start with the sidewalks, or do we say to the federal government or the state or wherever we're getting, I guess the first tranche is from the state, correct? So do we say to the state of Rhode Island, we want to put in sidewalks, does this qualify? Or do we put in the sidewalks and then say, we hope this qualifies?
Jamie?
Yeah, sorry. I have perused through the 134-page legislation, and to try and answer that question, you're not seeking, the funds are being distributed to the municipality for the municipality to spend according to the criteria that has been developed, with the rational nexus back to it is COVID related. Where I think you are vulnerable is if you are ever audited, that your audit material and backup material needs to tie back to why you did it. And then you need to substantiate that we put the sidewalks in because they were needed as a result of the pandemic and the economic development aspect, and exacerbated by the pandemic, and they served the community contained within the criteria that are within the provisions of the legislation. I'm not.
The only approval process is your own.
Yeah.
Is our own approval. We approve this because we believe it is COVID related.
Yes.
And then if the state or the federal government comes and says, how did you spend that 650,000? We say, we spent it on sidewalks because.
Yes. So
Okay.
The language of the act is that the act and the regulations give broad discretion to local units of government. The act and regulations do not require non-interference by state governments. Regulations require an annual report by each local government that describes how the funding was spent. Failure to spend appropriately can result in recoupment of federal funds. So that's the audit. If you misappropriate, at some point, a federal agency could potentially ask for their money back if you don't substantiate why. The town.
But there's you said something about an annual report in there. So that's
Yes.
probably a key factor right there.
Yes.
Okay.
Councilwoman Berger?
Thanks. I really like Abel's suggestion about creating a web page. I really do believe that the public is practically unaware that we are about to receive $9 million. And I think that the creation of a web page, putting up the slides that we've just seen tonight, linked to the video, and really soliciting input and comments. I agree we don't need to have a survey because I think people could lobby for their pet project. But I think having the community aware that we are having these conversations, having it as much as possible that people can learn about these meetings and attend. I mean, there's 2 work sessions, and really it's where we were gonna approve on the 12th. So that's not really a lot for the community to get involved with. So I'd like to try to increase at least the ability for them to understand what we're working on. They may still not choose to come, but I would like them to be able to see this information when they choose to. So if we could maybe even do the webpage, maybe do a press release to the papers just to say like we're having these conversations. I know Susan's gonna advertise, but it's not the same as, the town is developing ideas, because some of these are great and they are super exciting to think about, and I can see the great potential. But I also think I know residents wrote to me, and I forwarded on other suggestions about landscaping projects around the Saugatucket and brush removal and things like that. I just feel like we did have a lot to contribute a couple of months ago, and I'd just like to put that out for the community to have a web page and a portal. Is that possible?
Yeah, that's possible. We can certainly compile the information that we're sharing tonight in a fashion that people can access it through a specific web page on the town website.
I don't want you to do extra work, but just to have these materials available in a space, link back to this video, link back to other things. Because I do believe that, as Jess Rose had said, participatory budgeting is a very interesting way to bring a community together. And I think that we recognize that we are a divided community, and this may be a way to bridge some of that and bring together different perspectives and views on a common goal. So I know I had a conversation with Josh Daly about it. Also, if we could also just make sure that the town boards and commissions all know, if it's possible, just to send them an email if they're on a listserv of their own, to invite them to check out the webpage or to give input, because there's an incredible skill set of boards and commissions that I don't know if everyone is aware of what we're doing.
Thank you. I think that is a great idea to, sort of send it out through the boards and commissions. I'm sure those folks themselves will probably pass it on and try to gather input as well. So that would be, I think, a great way to go about distributing, sort of getting that input like that. Councilman McEntee.
Jamie, can you just sort of walk us through the 300,000 allocated toward the affordable housing $20,000 match there? Just walk us through how that would work. Maybe
Yeah.
Scroll down to maybe so we could look at it.
Yep. Again, part of my screen's blocked out by the tiles for everyone's picture tonight. But with regards to the 300,000 that Councilman McEntee mentioned, anticipated to be a $20,000 matching grant. So total project would bring $40,000 to the table, 20,000 from COVID rescue funds and 20,000 from the homeowner or private sector investment, in an attempt to create those 15 new affordable units. Whether they're market rate affordable or there's a requirement to deed restrict will be something that council will have to contemplate from a policy standpoint. Getting someone to perhaps do an accessory unit or garage conversion to their project. Someone who is just willing to purchase and rehabilitate an existing project and perhaps put a deed restriction on it and sell it as an affordable unit. So again, the goal there is to target 15 properties and make them affordable according to the state guidelines. Whether they're deed restricted or they just enter the market at low and medium income affordability is a discussion for the council on a policy side.
So this is sort of open to any private investor willing to create an affordable housing unit, and we would be willing to fund up to 20,000 of the total cost. Is that what this is?
Could be, yeah.
Okay.
Parameters.
We're not
that
specifically targeted toward nonprofit entities. This could be anything, private company, not-for-profit company, individual.
Yeah, if the council wanted it to be targeted to nonprofit, it could be set up that way. But right now, open parameters,
Okay.
all inclusive.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just to expand upon, if a nonprofit came and said, we would like to do all 15 units and would like $20,000 for each unit, all 15, that may be something that the council would entertain. I would expect that you would listen.
And how would we structure these sort of matching things? Sort of like a loan with an interest rate, provided that they do something by a certain time, then it will be relieved.
And we envision it to mirror some of the capital improvement programs that are out there throughout the country, where it would be a forgivable loan with a mechanics lien on the property, that if you met the performance standards, the loan was forgivable. If you did not, it's a lien against the property and the funds become available.
Got it. That makes sense.
Say, the project gets completed and then you get your rebate check. Versus giving someone $20,000 and asking for it back.
Now, same would apply toward those private sector investment matching grants?
Yes.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Bergen?
Thank you. So right below that is my question, the elderly home repair grants that I think, when we were in budget review and we talked to the organizations that really help seniors with some repairs, we doubled what we were giving. I can't remember if it's Seniors Helping Seniors or
Neighbors helping.
something close to that. I'm just curious, since we gave them 4,000, now this is like, I don't know, 25 times that, and they only really asked for 2. So I'm wondering, not that it's not a good idea, but like how we got to that amount, because that's 20, they might not have the ability to do it, or who are we thinking of when we put that amount together? Terry's nodding. So
Right. So that's a good question, Councilwoman Bergner. I think one of where it says nonprofit assistance on that particular line, it's not necessarily one organization, but there could be multiple local organizations that do that type of work. You've heard of the Home Wrap program. That's through the Elks Club. You have Neighbors Helping Others. We have potentially the Senior Retired Volunteers program. There's probably multiple agencies that could benefit from a piece of this $100,000 that would be earmarked and directed for this type of activity, elderly home repair grants.
So that would be at the next work session, some of those nonprofits would be speaking and trying to advocate for allocation from that 100,000. Is that?
So that's a possibility, yes. And also from the other piece of this program, if we look, where is it? There's other nonprofit funding available. So yes, but that specifically was called out when we went through coming up with prioritization, and certainly we know that there's plenty of people out there in our community, in our own community, who either have put off repairs with COVID isolation. That's been made worse for many. So that was called out specifically. Now, the next work session, there are going to be other requests that fall outside of what's been presented here this evening, and then the council would need to make some decisions about where they want to put the funding.
Councilwoman Rose?
Thanks, Abel. Terry, something that you just said stood out to me as far as elderly and isolation. Could any part of that funding be used to fund someone to check in on our elderly residents, to see where they're at coming out of this? Not everybody is comfortable coming forward, so is there some type of community outreach that we could do using a portion of that to, check on our elderly residents, see if their homes need repairs that have gone unattended for 1.5 years now? Is that something that's possible?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of options here. If you're looking at this type of funding availability, that either the organizations that may step up and say, we could use this funding and we could execute a program that involves outreach. They would have to describe what the program is, or the town could say, okay, here's the funding, here's what is expected with that funding, not just if people come to you, that there's a component within the program that says we will reach out to X amount of senior citizens living within the community, or we will promote through other social service agencies this program and request referrals. There's way to go about doing that with this funding. Certainly that's possible. I also think a piece of that can be wrapped into the whole mental wellness, mental health category as well, because of the social isolation piece. So outreach can be kind of a dual benefit in that you're not only seeking or looking for seniors who need help, excuse me, with the infrastructure of their homes, but also help for their well-being.
Right. Yeah. I'm reminded of, when we were meeting people where they're at with vaccines, and also with the EMS program, like the wraparound services, going back and checking on people. So all of that is kind of coming together and making me think maybe that's something that we need to look at with home repairs too, to make sure people are taken care of on that front. Thank you.
Welcome. I would also add that I think Chief Ewing Chow also has some funding in here that speaks to a similar line in line with mental health, is the public safety and mental health staffing, EMA and police. And maybe Chief, if you want to give a little background on that.
Sure, absolutely. So basically what I was envisioning for public safety with utilization of some of this funding was, and I'm starting to do it now, is create more of a community outreach unit within the police department that their sole focus wouldn't be on enforcement, arresting people, but plainclothes, going out and dealing with people with mental health issues. As Chief Stanley said, mental health is on the rise. People in crisis are on the rise throughout the town and throughout the country. And what I'm looking at is working with social service agencies, with clinicians, with Chief Stanley himself and his staff, in identifying people that are in crisis or people, and offering them services and kind of checking in on them, and also dealing with people that might not be in crisis yet, but might be starting down that road, to try to do some assist them with so they don't get into crisis. I see that as helping out the overall health of our community, as well as stopping the repetitive calls that we may get, dealing with the same individual all the time that has mental health issues. So I'm hoping to use this unit and money from here to hire an additional officer for, like I said, a 3-year program is what I was looking to do. And I have some funding here. I have some cost analysis here that's been done. And specifically, like I said, working with senior services and offering, whether it's mental health, working with seniors, whatever it may be within our community, and the police department and public safety in general, we have a good finger on the pulse of who needs help, because we do go to a lot of calls and we deal with a lot of people.
Yeah, and to tie it kind of back around to the housing piece, right? I'm thinking, like, when you do wellness checks or whatever, if there's a hoarding situation and they need help getting out of that, that might not have existed before COVID. They might not have lived like that. And now, after being isolated and separated from family, that it has become an issue. So, right, I think that would be how it would be tied into the housing piece.
Yeah, I mean, that certainly, if we saw a situation like that, whether it's our officers or even EMS, on Craig's, Chief Stanley's personnel, if we had an avenue to refer or have somebody else. Right now, we usually only work with Department of Elderly Affairs, which is a statewide program. But I really think we would be more beneficial if we had something more on the municipal level in town, where we could offer some direct services in a more expeditable fashion.
Great, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Councilwoman Rose, just kind of to talk, the core of the paramedicine program is when we have a list of people that we follow up on when we're going in, we're checking to make sure there's food in in the kitchen, that their medications, we're looking at the medications saying, okay, this medication is going to expire. Do you have a way to get to CVS? You have an appointment with your doctor next Tuesday. Do you have a ride? So it's more or less you're going in to do an assessment. You're also looking at the home. Are there any trip hazards? Your trash is building up. So it's kind of an all-being thing to make sure they're healthy in every aspect. So that's kind of the direction that we want to go. And like Chief Ewan Child said, the mental health aspect is, keeping them on, with their meds and keeping them, from recurring the same issues that they're having of getting on the right track and kind of coaching them along. That's kind of the core of it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. When you mentioned the trip hazards and checking out, make sure the house is safe. I think being able to streamline that a little bit with some of these funds is going to be, it'll be very beneficial. Thank you so much.
Councilman Bergner, your hand is up.
So we skipped, we were just with the chief. If the chief could come back and talk a little bit about what the drone might do, I was kind of interested to hear about that. And then also, if you could expand upon the youth employment program. And finally, at the end, I guess the bookmobile is really interesting. And I think like between Craig and the police, like we could really have like if we had an efficient economy of scale here, we could have all of that, like sort of a traveling, effort to sort of connect young, old, cradle to grave, engagement, mental health, community policing. I mean, there's an opportunity there. So thinking about that, but if we could just start at the drone and the youth program.
Sure. So because of COVID, we've seen, and now we're coming out of COVID, we've seen an increase with usage of our natural resources, whether it's the beach, as we saw the large traffic, the use of the coastline, the use of Warden's Pond, the use of our open areas, the Great Swamp Management Area. And I've wanted to get one of these so we can share within public safety with fire department and the police. And the purpose of this is to assist when we had to have search and rescue operations, whether it's somebody that's lost in the surf, lost in Warden's Pond, that's happened before in the Great Swamp. And the particular unit I was looking at, the price tag may look expensive. A lot of people think drone is something really small that you'd have in your own house, but this is a unit that is on the commercial level that has a thermal imaging camera to be able to use at night. To be able to identify if there's people lost, out at sea or in the woods. And I think it would be a real plus for our public safety. It takes one lost person and we're going to be tied up with many, many hours of manpower. We can cover the same ground and potentially locate somebody missing with the utilization of a drone. And I was just trying to kind of think of a way that we could use some of the funding and address the increased amount of tourism and people that are using our natural resources.
Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate that explanation. I think for the parent or the loved one, you would think that would be money well spent. So one time use would be worth it.
Exactly. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And then is Terry able to speak about the youth is that coming out through, where would that come, who would organize that?
So there's a couple of options there, but when this item was discussed, we were really focusing on youth who are now have aged out of recreation programs for seasonal summer programming. And looking at a model that would say, okay, let's look at the 15, 16, 17-year-olds who don't have anything to do for the summer. And then almost set it up similar to, and this is going way back, but similar to a counselor in training program with summer camps, also kind of a apprentice training programs with other seasonal type of jobs that the town has, particularly with the Parks and Recreation Department. at the town beach, at the rec center, with summer camps, where it would give an opportunity for teenagers to come on board, have a job, learn a job skill, whatever that might be, at least for a temporary summer period, and give them an opportunity to grow over the summer. Kids that might not otherwise be working or doing anything, quite frankly, or being at home alone. And again, it combats the whole result of social isolation, particularly with this age group. I think there's a bit of a gap for this particular population as it relates to what's available for them for personal enrichment and growth within the town. I mean, we have rec programs, but typically they go till 15, maybe 16. And then they kind of phase out, and then programs people come back on board for rec programs when they're out of college, and adult programming, that type of thing. So this would be that, or we could partner with an agency, excuse me, like a Tri-Town social service agency who has a program in place already, and it may be something that could enhance an existing program. But again, it speaks to combating the effects of COVID on teenagers and giving them a meaningful role in the summertime, in the off season.
Thank you. Terry, you did have your hand up for that discussion. I don't know if there was something else that you wanted to bring up.
No, that was it, actually. I will put my hand down. But we can certainly continue with the rest of the items that fall under the municipal investment. Is that?
So we've spent the whole time talking about this sort of Plan A, and I do, I think that that's because maybe we're more interested in Plan A, and Plan B we can just sort of sweep away at this point. But I did want to at least bring that possibility up. Is anybody interested in Plan B over Plan A? Councilwoman Kelso?
So I don't know that I am, because I don't know enough about why we would be investing $5 million in a new water treatment facility. So I'd love to hear from John Schock on what kind of a priority this is, and what happens if we don't do this.
So I can try to answer that question. So back in around early 2000, 2002, we have 3 wells at our Factory Pond well field, and we had to discontinue their use due to naturally occurring iron that's in the ground mantle. The iron levels got so high we couldn't treat for them anymore. So the only way to be able to go back to using that well field is through building a filtration plant. And obviously that plant would be specific for those users on the South Shore water system, the Middlebridge water system. We always have purchased our water from Suez, and we have since been purchasing water from Suez since 2002 for South Shore. So one benefit, should we choose at some point to build a filtration plant, it would give us an additional 1 million gallons a day, because that's what that field can typically support, to take some of the edge off of Suez supplying themselves, us, and they also supplied a majority of the town of Narragansett. That's not to say that water restrictions would still not be in place. I believe they still would be in place. And when I talked to Terry after the council meeting last night, and I'm in the process of preparing a briefing paper for the council on why it's a pretty complicated explanation as to why we are in these water restrictions each year. But I don't envision building a filtration plant for South Shore will solve that problem in and of itself for the community. So again, it's, at some point, I think, we're trying to reserve funding from the cell antenna revenue that we have on the water tanks to build up enough of a reserve that if we do have to go it without any supplemental funding, the debt service would not be crippling to the ratepayers for the water system. So, I mean, we can still stay the course with Suez. They have had 3 significant rate increases over the past, I'm going to say 7 or 8 years, in the order of, I think, high teens percentage wise. I don't know if that will continue. I believe it will to some extent. If they continue with their capital program, they did replace the Prout water tank and they did replace the Sherman water tank on Allen Avenue, which were significant capital expenditures. So again, we could still stay the course buying from Suez. At some point, we probably, again, may want to consider building a filtration plant if we can afford it and getting off of Suez.
John, just while we're on that topic, I remember 5 years ago when I was working up at the state, there was still a DEM matching grant program for like wellhead development. So, I know that existed at the state level. It wouldn't surprise me if maybe there was some federal grants for water supply improvements. Is that something where, if, we did have maybe not the full 5 million, but if we started looking towards setting up something to create a match?
So we all pay a water quality protection charge. A portion goes to Department of Administration, Water Resources Board, and a portion is supposed to come back, that used to come back to the water supplies. We have not seen that revenue in quite some time. It did go to we purchased land around the Factory Pond well field a number of years ago. Suez, which at that time was United Water, purchased land in proximity to their well fields. So we as water supplies have been asking the state for quite some time to see when our next amount of funding will come back from that. We have not heard back from the state. Other than the infrastructure bank state revolving fund, which is a low interest loan, it is not a grant. I am not aware of any other grant funding available for construction of a filtration plant.
All right, Terry or John, maybe did you want to lead us through this list that's on the screen right now? Are there any more things here that need to be highlighted?
If I may, Council President Collins, if we could we'll run through these municipal investment projects that we haven't touched upon already. Just quickly, one was the natural resource officer position, which you are aware of. That position was proposed for funding for a 2-year time frame. The need related directly to the impact with the public use of not only our town waters and boating activity, but also the parks, public access activity, the awareness by the public of public access points in town, and the increase in that activity during the pandemic by the public. That particular position was proposed for funding for a 2-year time frame at a full-time position with combination of the harbor master position as well. The bookmobile I'm going to ask Laurel if she'll give a brief description of the bookmobile project.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. And I apologize for no video. I'm having technical difficulties. So thank you. Good evening. And it is just what it sounds like, a bookmobile, but I think it would have a lot of impact on the things we talked about tonight. My colleagues, mental health, the isolation, many things that we all faced by COVID. We had reduced hours, we had reduced services, and I think this is an opportunity to get us back in the spotlight and be able to share what the library has to offer I think it goes a long way to mental well-being. I think there's a lot of things that people, especially lower income, older people, my cat, sorry, have missed out on and count on the library for, that if we could just get mobile, we could spread it around more than just our wonderful branches that we have in town. And I found it interesting what Councilwoman Bergner said about the how you can maybe combine some of these things. If you have, target audiences that you want to reach, I think it's just another set of eyes on the streets. So I think it would be impactful, and it would be something that would help us just to reach new audiences. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Councilwoman Rose?
Thank you. Laurel, I just want to throw it out there that I have been talking with 2 other community members over the past couple of years, actually trying to figure out how we could get something like this off the ground. And they have some great ideas and some wonderful resources, and sort of a plan as to how we might do this quickly. We just weren't sure how to go about it. So I'm happy to put you in touch with them.
Oh, I'd really like that. I will say I have gotten some pretty good quotes. So the figure you see would, cover the cost of the bookmobile. Of course, there would be extra support charges. We would need to be able to staff it. The maintenance, whatever comes with owning a vehicle like that. So I just think it has a lot of potential. So, yes, please.
I agree. And I'll send along those names and their contact information to you.
Thank you so much. And I would like to shout out to my trustees in attendance. Thanks, guys, for coming to the meeting. Appreciate that.
All right. That sort of takes us through most of this list in the nonprofit childcare. We have information on that.
So I think I misspoke a little bit earlier when I spoke about the community agencies coming and seeking funding that wasn't included here. This is the funding that I was looking for earlier. So it would be proposed that there be $100,000 set aside for granting to child care agencies to assist low mod income families. We know that child care is an issue any day of the week. It's particularly challenging, or was particularly challenging during COVID, and I'm certain it still is for many people. So this particular allotment of funds would be available for eligible child care agencies so that they can assist with offsetting costs for eligible families to be able to find affordable child care. And well, let me stop there if there are any questions.
I do see Chief has his hand raised.
Yes, thank you. Really quick, while we're going through the list, I just wanted to add for the council, part of my request for the 500,000 for public safety personnel. I also put in their emergency management EMA. The purpose of that was I envision hiring a part-time EMA person to come up with better emergency management plans, whether it's their skill set is going to be specific to doing that, whether it's to dealing with pandemics, dealing with floods, dealing with natural disasters. And the only reason I say that is when the pandemic did hit, Chief Stanley and Captain Mark Healy, they had to drop everything they were doing to handle figuring out how we're going to do notifications, how we're going to sanitize, how we're going to do points of distribution once the vaccine came out. And what I learned from that is you can never be over prepared. And I got to tell you that I think us, like many other communities, maybe we were very underprepared. And I would like the potential to hire a part-time individual to assist with moving us forward with looking at specific planning for future pandemics or future issues that we have, and giving us as the town overall proper guidance based on their skill set and their specific knowledge to emergency management. Thank you.
Go on, Terry.
Just to continue on down this list of the municipal investment, there is also $300,000 proposed for a grant and contract manager. $9 million is a lot of money to manage and to ensure that it's being appropriated and tracked via contracts, depending on what these programs are. And the recommendation is that there should be a dedicated grant and contract manager for a minimum of two-year position. The next item on the list, actually the next two items, I'll ask our IT director, Lori Fox, to speak to the Office 365 software upgrade and the audiovisual meeting equipment for the town council chambers.
Thank you, Chair. Just real briefly, with the grant and contract manager position, I would be hopeful that we could just add another ampersand there and say writer. It would be wonderful to have a grant writer.
Yeah, good point. Thank you. Lori?
All right, thank you. Good evening. So the next two items on the list here, one is Office 365. So a couple of years ago, we moved our email to the cloud, just email, not Word and Excel and the other complements as part of the Office suite. When we had to work remotely, it became a challenge as far as sharing files, being able to work on things at the same time. In particular, that Terry can attest to, when we were trying to reach out to our senior population, we were trying to work off of the same Excel file, and because we didn't have it in a cloud environment, in a cooperative space, people had to work on it individually and offline, and then we had to try and put the data back together. So it was a challenge, and a lot of the email, the Word, the Excel things that we do are in direct support of services to the constituency. So this is something that was budgeted further out in CIP, so it could be reduced going forward. It is a hard cost of $50,000. And it is something that would have an impact going forward on the annual budget because it's a cloud service. So that's something we would see an increase to the budget going forward. In regards to the audio visual, I've had two vendors come in the last few weeks. There is a master price agreement with the state of Rhode Island that has several vendors on it. So I had two of them come in to assess our current town council to see what we could do, assuming that hybrid meetings are going to be the norm going forward. So they have come in with some cost and improvements. At the same time, I've included 7 conference rooms placed at the Guild, the library, the police department, public services, the rec center, the senior center, and the town hall to have an additional place for some of the smaller meetings to meet so that we can still meet in person, but at the same time work via Zoom or potentially Microsoft Teams so that we can keep participation both in person and remote with our council and our boards and commission.
Thank you.
So
Council.
if there's any questions.
Thanks, Siebel. Thank you for that summary. I have a question. So the schools use Google, right? They use Gmail, Google Classroom, Google Meets. Is there a reason that the town doesn't do that as well? I feel like this was mentioned at one point, and I don't remember what the answer was.
Yep. I think it did come up once before. So the town early on, before I came on board about 8 years ago, had already invested in Microsoft Office. So the transition was much smoother. The learning curve was less. Schools also tend to get either some free items. A lot of the times they'll get their students at no cost for K through 12, but they have to pay for the admin side. And actually, Google's changing their pricing model. I actually spoke with a couple of the folks at the school IT department as well to find out what they were spending. And their spend is going to change considerably, because right now they don't pay for any of the Google services. But as I said, Google's changing their pricing model. So I actually did have a conversation with the municipal Google representative, and they estimate, because they have not given me a firm cost yet, they estimate that their costs would be about $47,000 to $48,000 a year. Plus, we would also incur a cost to migrate everything, which again, they estimated somewhere between $10,000 to $20,000 on top of the annual spend. The other reason why we stuck with the Office suite is, at the time, Google Sheets was not very well versed in a number of the things that we do. So we have spreadsheets that do some pivot tables, links out with Word documents and things like that. And that did not work well. We also have Access databases that we use for different information that we retain. And that was something that was lacking on the Google side as well.
Thanks so much for explaining that. I'm the least technologically inclined person ever. You mentioned pivot something. I don't even know what that is, but it's helpful to know that it's been looked into. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for that. I think that covers that second sort of section there. Were there any other, we haven't really talked about broadband, I guess, in depth. You wanna?
So we do have that also under a Plan B, the broadband downtown Main Street district. And again, Lori has done some research on that and what it would cost. It is something that would be eligible under the guidelines. Lori, you want to give an overview, please?
Sure, thank you. So the Main Street area, we were looking initially when the pandemic hit. The state of Rhode Island had some grants and initiatives for Take It Outside. And it was something that the planning department, along with Terry and the rec department, we had looked at some various options. Marina Park was one of them, the downtown area. Marina Park, because of the size logistically, has some unique challenges. So one of the items, because again, it was a Plan B option in case other things did not get covered, we thought we wanted to have some projects ready to go with cost associated with that. The downtown Main Street area, we would cover Wi-Fi basically from around the bicycle shop all the way down to, I think it's Smith Oil, that area right there. So the idea was to get people back into the downtown area. And one of the things, if they're shopping and they're enjoying ice cream, is that they sit on the benches. If they're able to access Wi-Fi, they tend to stay longer in the hopes that the longer they stay, they'll go into shops and revitalize some of the businesses that were impacted during COVID. And that actually is something that would be a DBO project, a design, build, operate. So it would be something that you know, we would potentially bid and look for a vendor to handle that for us.
Thank you. And the broadband radio project, is that something that Lance would talk about? Sounds like it's up his alley.
Yes, good evening. That was put on the Plan B because it was, you know, something that is going to take place. We have some T1 lines now that go to our radio sites, and that would just be an extension of the town's fiber ring to pick up the site. So it would be town owned instead of leasing lines from Verizon.
All right.
If- Oh,
go on.
I was just going to say, I'm sorry, Council President, I was just going to add in as kind of a piece of that as well, was extending the town's private fiber to both the water and wastewater plants that currently do not have that. We pay for additional lines for the wastewater department. So it was, if we were going to be running fiber to some of the tanks, they're closely proximate to these other town offices. So we thought we could extend the fiber there as well.
All right, I think that brings us to the end of the list. Any sort of general comments about you know, the presentation tonight from Councilman? I really appreciate the discussion and continuing it when we get the outside agencies coming in for the next work session. To me, this is a pretty good list. I would lean towards option A here and all the great discussion we've had tonight. I think there's a lot of great sort of bread and butter, meat and potatoes, little improvements that'll go a long way to, you know, improving the town and making good use of this funding. I would say, you know, we should think about whether we want to be a little more imaginative with some things. Like I see Old Mountain Field, and I think all those improvements are really important. At 300,000, could we bump it up to 400,000 and make like the skate park the best skate park in Rhode Island, and really make it a draw for you know, even the region to get tourism in here that way? Or, you know, similarly thinking about some of these where we've put in sort of the baseline number, but if we just expanded that a little bit, could we make something that is really special and turn it into something that really helps our tourism industry here? I do think that I would also carve out some specific money for the Saugatucket project, just because that's been such a focus for the EDC here locally. And I know already a lot of thought and plans are going into it. So it would be well, you know, an efficient use. Those were sort of my basic takeaways. I want to thank all the staff for coming together and, you know, whittling it down. I know there were a lot more projects than this. Terry?
I just want to point out a couple of things. One is that there is on the horizon another stimulus package at the federal level that it will be dealing with infrastructure. So we would be hoping that that would also trickle down to the local municipalities. I'm not sure when that's coming out, but that's something that we look forward to seeing as well. Also, with regard to the outside agencies, we will be putting out an invitation to as many agencies as we are aware of locally to be able to make them aware that the public work session is on June 29th, and invite them to come and present. And also we'll be placing an ad in the paper for that as well. So we do, you know, we are hoping that we will get a good cross-section of agencies to come and tell us how they can help contribute to recovering from the pandemic.
Terry. All right, well, I know we had a late night last night, so getting out of here by 9 seems like a good goal. Any last minute comments? Otherwise, we can wait till next time. All right, very good. Well, thank you all for being part of this conversation. Really exciting stuff. Have a good night, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.